It all started with an email that had more tension in it than a James Bond movie. Subject: formal dinner invitation, attendance required. My boss, Gregory Penfield, CEO of Penfield and Company, had decided to throw a fancy dinner party for all mid-level managers. That included me, Ethan Greer, customer success manager and longtime sufferer of corporate nonsense. The email had weirdly specific instructions: dress formally, arrive promptly, bring nothing but your best behavior. What did that even mean? Was I supposed to act like I wasn't drowning in spreadsheets and existential dread? Nevertheless, I spent the whole week preparing. Rented a suit, Googled fancy dinner etiquette, and practiced not saying anything sarcastic. My girlfriend Tessa, who is dangerously supportive, helped coach me through small talk topics like wine, sailing, and succulent gardening. I don't do any of those things, but I was determined to impress Gregory, or at least not spill anything on his Persian rug. Saturday arrived, and as we pulled up to his mansion, because of course it's a mansion, I felt like I was entering an episode of The Bachelor, if all the contestants wore cufflinks and had LinkedIn Premium. A valet took my car keys like I was someone important. Tessa gave me a wink and whispered, "Just be normal." I nodded solemnly, like a soldier heading into battle. The door opened and we were greeted not by a butler, but by Gregory himself, wearing a velvet blazer and cradling a glass of something so fancy it probably had a passport. "Ethan, so glad you could make it," he said with a grin. "Come in, relax. Act natural." Those two words, act natural, should have been my first red flag. Because the next 4 hours would include flaming cheese, a talking parrot named Chairman Meow, and me losing all hope of a promotion. We stepped into the grand foyer and were immediately greeted by the aroma of something buttery, spicy, and way out of my tax bracket. Gregory's house was absurd. There was a crystal chandelier the size of a compact car, a grand piano that looked like no one was allowed to touch it, and a glass case displaying what I later found out was his vintage keyboard collection. Not musical keyboards. Computer keyboards. Because Gregory, for all his charisma and velvet blazers, was also deeply weird. "Let me show you around," he offered. I would have politely declined, but the man held shareholder meetings like hostage negotiations, so I nodded like I was fascinated by retro QWERTY. As we walked through the living room, I noticed a parrot in a golden cage by the window. It was wearing a tiny bow tie. Before I could question anything, the parrot squawked, "Gregory owes the IRS." Gregory froze, then laughed a little too hard. "Ignore him. Chairman Meow likes to repeat nonsense." Chairman Meow cocked his head and muttered, "Shell Corporation," then went silent. I locked eyes with Tessa, who mouthed, "What is this place?" We were soon ushered into the dining room where other co-workers were awkwardly sipping wine and pretending they'd rather be here than watching Bake-Off reruns. Gregory stood at the head of the table. "Dinner is an experience," he announced, "so each course will be interactive." My stomach turned. Interactive? The only thing I wanted interacting with me was a plate of lasagna. The first course was build your own bruschetta, followed by a flaming saganaki dish that set off the smoke detector. Tessa clapped. Gregory called it an immersive culinary surprise. I called it a reason to check the exits. And then, just as the room began to settle down, a waiter brought in a tray of what looked like seaweed and battery acid. "Fermented sea cucumber foam," Gregory declared proudly. That's when things took a dramatic turn. I don't know if it was the fermented sea cucumber foam or the tension of pretending I liked it, but my stomach began staging a quiet rebellion. Tessa leaned over and whispered, "You're turning the color of that wasabi paste." I smiled weakly and tried to focus on Gregory, who was now giving a toast about synergy and sustainable leadership, which, frankly, felt like he was quoting from his own TED Talk. Then, like a magician unveiling a rabbit, he pulled out a remote control and dimmed the lights. "Now," he said dramatically, "for the real entertainment." The curtains drew back to reveal a massive flat-screen TV. A video began playing, a slideshow titled "The Soul of Penfield and Company." It was basically a series of images of Gregory looking thoughtful in different lighting. Occasionally, a quote floated across the screen like, "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one's zooming." The crowd responded with polite chuckles and one audible yawn. I thought we'd hit peak weirdness, but I was so very wrong. As the video ended, Gregory turned to us and said, "Now it's your turn. Each of you will share something vulnerable, something raw, so we can all grow closer as a team." I almost spit out my fizzy elderflower water. Vulnerability? In front of Susan from accounting, who once passive-aggressively corrected my email grammar? Gregory pointed to me first. "Ethan, let us off." My brain went blank. The room fell silent. Even Chairman Meow paused his repetitive muttering. I panicked. And in that panic, I blurted, I once pretended to be British for an entire week of college orientation because I thought it made me more interesting. Everyone stared. Tessa looked like she wanted to dissolve into her chair. Gregory slowly clapped. Now that is authenticity, he said. Bravo. I'd survived. Or so I thought, until Susan stood up and said, I have something to confess. I accidentally sent the client deck to the wrong Harper and Jones last month. A hush fell. That deck had cost us a huge deal. Gregory blinked. Wait, that was you. Things unraveled fast from there. One by one, people started spilling secrets like it was a corporate therapy circle gone rogue. Someone admitted to using the company Uber for a trip to a wine festival. Another confessed that the plants in the lobby had been fake for 3 years and nobody noticed. Tessa leaned over and whispered, This is like watching The Office, but in real life and with worse lighting. I was about to respond when the room suddenly went dark. A loud squawk followed. Then the lights flickered back on, and Chairman Meow was gone. His cage was wide open. Panic set in. Chairman, Gregory called out, his voice trembling. Chairman Meow? Someone screamed in the kitchen. We all rushed in to find the parrot sitting on the stove, pecking at the Saganaki flames. He's drawn to fire, the chef yelled, trying to swat the parrot away with a ladle. Gregory dove forward, shouting, No, but it was too late. The parrot knocked over a bottle of some kind of flammable liquor. The flame shot up and singed the curtains. People screamed. Someone threw a pitcher of sangria. I grabbed a decorative throw pillow and tried to smother the fire. Tessa was valiantly using a bottle of sparkling water. The chef activated the fire extinguisher, covering everything and everyone in white foam. It looked like a rave in a snow globe. The fire was out, the parrot unharmed but smug, and the entire kitchen looked like a marshmallow massacre. Gregory stood there in silence, soaked and trembling, foam dripping from his eyebrows. This was supposed to be team building, he whispered. It built something, I said weakly, mostly trauma. He didn't laugh, but Chairman Meow did. He let out a chillingly human-sounding giggle. That's when I realized this parrot had seen things. And worse, he remembered everything. Cleanup was chaos. People tiptoed around soggy bruschetta and foam puddles while pretending this was all totally normal for a corporate dinner. Gregory vanished upstairs, likely to scream into a pile of artisanal pillows. Meanwhile, Chairman Meow strutted around like he owned the place, occasionally yelling, Audit incoming, just to keep the mood spicy. Tessa and I tried to quietly excuse ourselves, but just as we reached the front door, Gregory reappeared. He had changed into a fresh velvet blazer and was holding what looked like a laptop. I think, he said with a twitchy smile, we've all had a transformative evening. No one replied. He opened the laptop and set it on the grand piano. Before anyone leaves, I'd like to share a little project I've been working on. You see, I'm very into home security. Cameras, audio, motion sensors. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. So, he continued, I thought it might be enlightening to play back some of tonight's highlights. I froze. Audio. I immediately thought of the bathroom break I took where I told Tessa I was faking my enthusiasm for team synergy and just wanted to go home and watch trashy reality TV. The video began. Multiple camera angles. Crisp audio. It was like watching surveillance footage from a reality show no one consented to. Here's our dear Ethan, Gregory narrated, pointing to the screen. There I was, mid-rant. If I hear immersive culinary journey, one more time I'm sticking my head in the Parmesan fountain. People laughed. I died inside. Then came Susan's client deck confession, followed by a clip of 2 co-workers secretly swapping name tags to confuse HR. This, Gregory said triumphantly, is real vulnerability. The room was silent. I glanced at Tessa, who whispered, This man's building an HR lawsuit in real time. Suddenly, the screen glitched. A new clip started playing, Chairman Meow's cage cam. Gregory smells like expired truffle oil, the parrot squawked. And then, chillingly, check the USB in the keyboard drawer. Everyone turned to look at Gregory. His face went pale. He slammed the laptop shut. Dinner's over, he said, voice cracking. Good night. We were ushered out like unwanted guests at a wedding. But I couldn't stop thinking about that parrot's message. A USB? In the keyboard drawer? I couldn't sleep that night. Tessa kept saying, Let it go, Ethan. The parrot was probably just trained to say weird stuff. But Chairman Meow's cryptic phrase haunted me. Check the USB in the keyboard drawer. What kind of parrot says that? One that's either been in a very shady escape room or had access to sensitive information. Monday morning arrived and the office was buzzing. Word had spread fast. Everyone was talking about the dinner disaster like it was a company-wide fever dream. Someone had even made a meme of me with foam in my hair, captioned, "When the team building builds an HR case." I was avoiding Gregory like the plague, but he was nowhere to be seen. Around noon, I got called into IT. "We're upgrading your laptop," they said, all cheery. Standard refresh. I'm not a genius, but even I knew this was corporate speak for, "We heard your bathroom confession, and now you're on thin ice." I signed the form, took the new laptop, and headed back to my desk. But something didn't sit right. So during my break, I took the elevator up to the executive floor. I told the receptionist I had urgent documents for Gregory, and she waved me through like I was delivering scrolls from the king. Gregory's office was dark. I slipped inside and went straight for the vintage keyboard display. The drawer beneath the first one was locked. Of course it was. But the second drawer? Slightly ajar. I opened it. Inside, a USB stick. Labeled in red Sharpie, "Do not insert." Which, obviously, is the exact phrase you should never put on something if you want people to obey. My heart pounding, I shoved it in my pocket and bolted. Tessa nearly had a meltdown when I showed her later. "Ethan, you stole a USB from your boss's private drawer. Are you trying to get fired?" "No," I said. "I'm trying to figure out what in the name of flaming cheese is going on here." That night, I plugged the USB into my personal laptop. A folder popped up instantly. Chairman_meow_recordings. I clicked. The first file was labeled Gregory_phone_call_confession.mp3. I hit play and instantly dropped my glass of water. The audio crackled to life, and for a second, I thought it was just static, until I heard Gregory's voice, crystal clear. "Yeah, well, if the board ever found out about the Cayman account, I'd be toast." Pause. Then, laughter. Nervous, greasy laughter. That's why Chairman's trained. He repeats random phrases. Plausible deniability, right? I slapped my laptop shut like it had personally offended me. "Cayman account?" Tessa whispered, eyes wide. "Why does your boss sound like he's laundering money with a bird sidekick?" "Because he might be," I said. "And his parrot is an accidental whistleblower." I should have turned it in. I should have called the board. I should have done anything except what I actually did, which was email the audio file to myself with the subject line, "If I disappear, blame the bird." The next morning, I tried to act normal at work. But Gregory was back, pacing the halls with the energy of someone who knew exactly one USB was missing. He called an emergency all-staff meeting. "I've decided," he began, voice overly calm, "to restructure leadership. Transparency is vital. Integrity is non-negotiable. And trust, above all, trust is sacred." I locked eyes with Tessa across the room. She slowly mouthed, "You're toast." Gregory continued. "If anyone knows anything about recent events," he said, pausing, "please come forward. Anonymity is guaranteed." A lie so bold even the office plants recoiled. I didn't breathe for 30 minutes. Back at my desk, I opened the USB folder again. Dozens of recordings. Not just phone calls, meetings, private conversations, even one titled, Therapy_session_rec_2024.mp3. Why was Gregory recording his own therapy sessions? Chairman Meow's cage must have had 24/7 audio capture. I played a few more files. One was Gregory crying about a man named Raymond, muttering, "He'll ruin me if he ever gets those contracts." Another featured Gregory rehearsing his laugh. I mean, really, rehearsing it. Ha. Ha ha. No, that's too serial killer. Try again. I couldn't unhear it. The real kicker? One labeled Legal Advice, delete after listening. It included the line, "As long as the parrot can't testify, we're fine." That's when I knew. I had to do something. And I had a very stupid idea. The plan was so dumb, it almost circled back around to genius. If Chairman Meow was the unwitting surveillance system behind Gregory's shady empire, then the bird needed to go public. Not eliminated. Mind you, just hurt. I wasn't about to smuggle a parrot into a courtroom, but I could smuggle a parrot into the annual shareholder meeting. Tessa was absolutely against it. You want to steal your boss's talking bird, smuggle him into a corporate event, and hope he blurts out federal crimes? Ethan, you'll go to jail. Or worse, HR. But I couldn't unhear that Cayman account audio. So on Friday, dressed like a delivery guy, I showed up at Gregory's house. I brought a fake invoice, a clipboard, and the confidence of someone with no backup plan. The housekeeper let me in. "Mr. Penfield isn't home right now," she said, squinting at the paperwork. "He said no deliveries until Monday." "This is urgent," I replied, using my best "I work in logistics" voice. "Something about backup storage for the keyboard humidity chamber?" She looked confused enough to let me through. I walked straight to the parrot's cage. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. Chairman Meow blinked at me. "Tax evasion," he said sweetly. I carefully opened the cage, placed him in a padded cat carrier, no cats involved, and walked out like I'd just delivered a pizza. It was shockingly easy. Back at our apartment, Chairman Meow adjusted quickly. He enjoyed sunflower seeds, daytime talk shows, and repeating whatever he heard in a British accent. "Gregory's a naughty boy," he chirped. I had one day to prep for the shareholder meeting. Gregory was planning to unveil something he called Operation Synergy Wave. I was planning to unveil a parrot who could sink him with a single squawk. I bought a large tote bag, modified it with mesh lining and a discreet microphone, and rehearsed everything with Chairman Meow. "What does Gregory have in the Caymans?" I'd ask. "Dirty money," he'd reply. Tessa just drank coffee silently in the background and muttered, "This is how people end up in true crime documentaries." On the day of the meeting, I dressed up, grabbed the tote, and whispered, "We ride at dawn." Chairman Meow responded, "All assets offshore." It was go time. The shareholder meeting was being held at the Marriott Conference Center, complete with lanyards, cold brew dispensers, and enough corporate jargon to induce a nosebleed. I arrived early, wearing a navy blazer and the calm expression of a man who did not have a potentially explosive bird in his tote bag. "Sir, are you carrying a pet?" the security guard asked, eyeing the slight movement near my hip. "Nope," I replied confidently. "Just a very active emotional support scarf." He blinked, then waved me through. Either he believed me, or he didn't get paid enough to argue. Inside, Gregory was already pacing near the podium, rehearsing lines from what looked like a PowerPoint titled Vision 2025. Bold, brave, bulletproof. He had no idea he was about to be roasted by his own bird. The room filled up. Suits sat, tablets glowed, and Gregory took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "we are on the cusp of something transformative." I unzipped the tote slightly. Chairman Meow blinked at the light. "Remember," I whispered, "nail your cue." Gregory droned on about cross-departmental paradigms and scaling synergy like a fractal. My eyes scanned the room, board members, journalists, even some skeptical investors. This was it. I discreetly hit a button on my phone that activated the mini mic clipped inside the tote. "And now," Gregory declared, "let's talk international expansion." I gently tapped the bag. Chairman Meow squawked once. Then again. And then, loud and clear, "Gregory's got a Cayman stash." Naughty, naughty. Gasps. Actual, audible gasps. Gregory froze. I could see his soul leave his body for a brief moment. The murmurs grew. Someone near the front turned to their neighbor and whispered, "Did the bird just say Cayman stash?" Chairman Meow wasn't done. "Shell companies. Tax dodge. Delete the files, Gregory." Gregory dropped his remote. "That bird is lying," he shouted. Which was, frankly, the worst possible thing to say in that moment. You never scream, "That bird is lying" at a shareholder meeting. It's just bad PR. Flashbulbs popped. Phones were raised. Someone live-streamed it with the caption, "CEO melts down, gets owned by Parrot." And then came the final blow. Chairman Meow chirped, "Check the USB, baby. It's spicy." The room exploded. Panic doesn't begin to describe it. Gregory lunged off the stage, eyes wild, tie swinging like a broken pendulum. "Give me that bird," he screamed, which, again, is not a sentence you want trending online next to your company logo. Security intercepted him mid-charge. The tote bag was now squawking with triumphant glee. "He launders his socks and his income," yelled Chairman Meow, clearly thriving under pressure. Cameras zoomed. Investors whispered. And the board members? Oh, they stood up like judges on The Voice, only instead of spinning their chairs, they all simultaneously reached for their phones. "Mr. Penfield," one said calmly, "we're going to need to speak with you. In private." Gregory looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time, like someone waking up mid-dream and realizing they're at work in their underwear. "This is entrapment," he hissed. "It's a bird. He's been edited." But his voice was drowned out by the sound of Chairman Meow singing fraudulent expenses in what could only be described as an off-key opera voice. Two suited men escorted Gregory out of the ballroom. The door shut with a satisfying thud. I was left standing there, tote bag slung over one shoulder, watching the fallout unfold like a live episode of Succession. One of the board members approached me slowly. "Ethan, is it?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how sweaty my hands were. "Where did you get the recordings?" "I found them. In a drawer. That had a keyboard in it. Or next to it. Drawer adjacent." She raised an eyebrow. "Right." Another board member chimed in. "You may have just saved this company from a PR disaster. Or caused one. But either way, you've uncovered something serious. We'd like to speak with you privately, without the Parrot." Chairman Meow responded by saying, "I want immunity and snacks." "He speaks for me," I muttered. They didn't laugh. I followed them down a long hallway, suddenly aware that I had no plan beyond expose Gregory with Talking Bird. We entered a side room where a stern-looking lawyer shut the door behind us. "You're not in trouble," he said. "But we need to know exactly how long this Parrot has been recording, and who else might have heard those files." The boardroom was cold. Not just temperature-wise, vibe-wise. I sat across from 3 stone-faced board members and 1 paralegal who blinked exactly once every minute, like a metronome powered by disappointment. "To clarify," one of them said, "you removed the Parrot from Gregory Penfield's private residence?" "Borrowed," I said. "I borrowed the Parrot. Technically. And you were aware he'd been recording conversations?" "No," I said honestly. But once I heard the files, I couldn't unknow. They all leaned in slightly, like synchronized sharks. "So," another asked, "do you still have the USB?" "Yes." "And the recordings?" "Yes." Also backed up on the cloud. "In 2 emails. One labeled, 'Definitely not blackmail.'" The one blinking woman finally spoke. "Mr. Greer, this situation is incredibly unprecedented. Gregory has been under informal investigation, but no one could pin anything. You, however, with the help of a wildly overqualified bird, may have just handed us enough to launch an official audit. So, I'm not getting fired." "Fired," she almost smiled. "We'd like to promote you." My jaw dropped. "What position?" "Director of Internal Ethics and Transparency." Tessa was going to die laughing. "There's just one condition," they added. "Chairman Meow stays with you." "Wait, permanently?" "He's part of the evidence chain. Also, his cage is bugged with security-grade microphones. You've already proven you can manage him." "I work in customer success," I protested. "I don't babysit snitches and feathers." "You do now." That's how I became the proud companion of a parrot who could quote company bylaws and also meow like a cat during full moons. Over the next few weeks, Gregory's empire crumbled. Auditors swarmed. The IRS arrived like avenging angels in khaki suits. The media caught wind of the Whistle Parrot scandal, and overnight I became the guy who brought down a CEO using a bird with trust issues. Tessa made a custom mug that said, "Whistlebird Hero," and I drank from it proudly. But just when I thought the madness was over, when the board had cleared me, Gregory had been publicly booted, and Chairman Meow was finally adjusting to our apartment, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered, cautiously. The voice on the other end? "Gregory." "Ethan," he growled, "enjoy your little promotion. But this isn't over. You have no idea what that parrot actually knows." Then he hung up, and Chairman Meow, without missing a beat, whispered, "There's more." The silence after that call felt louder than the squawk of any bird. I stared at Chairman Meow, who was nonchalantly chewing on a dried banana chip like he hadn't just dropped a verbal nuclear bomb. "There's more?" I asked, wide-eyed. He didn't reply. He just blinked, puffed up his feathers, and muttered something that sounded like classified. I spent the night digging through the rest of the USB files like a paranoid raccoon searching for meaning in a dumpster. Most were harmless. Gregory singing Despacito in the shower. Gregory crying after losing a chess match to his phone. Gregory practicing inspirational speeches in front of a mirror and calling himself Daddy Vision. But then, I found one file tucked in a hidden folder labeled archive_old/burn_later. It was grainy, timestamped from 3 years ago. Gregory wasn't alone. He was meeting with someone, a man with his back to the camera. They were talking about shell companies, fake invoices, something about invisible investments. And then I heard it, my name. "We'll make Greer the fall guy if anything leaks. He's harmless. Won't ask questions." My blood froze. They planned to use me as the scapegoat. 3 years ago, before I even got promoted, before I had access to anything worth scapegoating. This whole time, I wasn't just lucky, I was pre-selected. Gregory had placed me exactly where he needed me, just in case things went sideways. And now that they had, he'd gone underground, and I was in the spotlight. I looked at Chairman Meow. How much do you actually know? He squawked. We were never partners. Okay. Dramatic, I said. But fair. I forwarded the archived file to the board with a note that read, There's your conspiracy. P.S. Can I get a raise? The next morning, the company released a statement. We are undergoing full internal review. Ethan Greer has been reassigned. Reassigned? What? To where? That's when my phone buzzed again. An internal transfer order, Director of Special Assets Protection. And below it, attached, please find your one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. Chairman Meow will accompany you. Mission brief to follow. I stared at it for a long moment. The parrot cocked his head and said, Vacation time, baby. Turns out, I didn't just expose a scandal. I got promoted into one.